Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us. So exciting to see so many of you have chosen us today. My name is Morika. I'm really glad to welcome you to yet another Customer Success Network webcast. Today is a very, very special edition. We have not one, but two amazing speakers, both joining us from Workday. It's my pleasure to introduce Carrie Ardalan, who's a Senior Manager of Customer Success Enablement and Operations, and Simi Kacker, who's a business analyst. These amazing ladies will be joining forces today to take us through how they recently began solving the challenge of mapping customer success and aligning internal teams around the necessary steps to prove return on investment and move key customer results forward. The theoretical and practical approaches to success planning differ immensely from company to company. We know about this, the Customer Success Network, because together with our members, we very often debate about a number of questions around them. When are they constructed? What's the optimal template? How do we get other teams involved? So should sales and product to be a part of that? And last but not least, should we have an internal and an external version, or simply one plan that outlines kind of clear steps to results? Workday had a very specific challenge that they needed to address with success plans, beginning with an internal adoption plan. For customer success, they sought to use data in a very clever way to unite internal teams around the success of their client base. Today, Carrie and Simi will tell us about how they approached the challenge, their results to date, as well as how they plan to expand and develop success planning. I personally cannot wait. As usual, we want to be as interactive as possible, so please guys do get involved. Post questions in the Q&A box. We're going to have two stops, one in the middle and one towards the end of the presentation. As usual, we're live streaming in our workplace community so that you can watch the webcast in future. We have a super exciting topic and content to come. So ladies, over to you.
Thank you so much, Marika. So as Marika said, I'm Carrie Ardalan and I manage our customer success enablement and operations team. It's a super long title. I've been with Workday a little under a year, but coming from companies like Box and SAP. And then I have Simi Kacker with me. Simi, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Simi, and I'm a business analyst with the customer success enablement and operations team. So I work for Carrie, and I've been at Workday for just over 2 years now, which is super exciting.
Awesome. So today we're going to take you through what we have at Workday called our Shelfware Challenge. And then we'll talk through our solution and how we executed on that through success planning. And then we'll give you a look into our future and long-term vision. So at Workday, we had somewhat of a unique challenge related to adoption, and it was different than what I had experienced in the past, and was pretty comprehensive. So when you think about success or adoption planning, you're usually pushing for growth and mitigating risk through adoption and sentiment. So at Workday, we have a good problem. So historically, our net retention is always above industry standards, and our CSAT is 97% and above. So our risk is not really in full churn, but more in shelfware. At Workday, we also sell in bundles and then we deploy those in phases. So some SKUs may get put on the back burner or they require larger efforts to deploy. So over time, they may remain on the shelf and become what we refer to as shelfware. We define shelfware as anything that's been sitting, not deployed beyond 12 months. That's really the tipping point where customers may start to question the value of those SKUs and they may even consider dropping them. So because of that, not only is adoption of deployed SKUs really important, but so is the deployment itself. Another challenge we have is we have very large account teams. So that includes sales, we have customer base account executives, managing partners, and CSMs, and they all have competing priorities. So our sales team may look at methods of retention and growth like suites or net retention. And then our CSMs are KPI'd mainly on deployment and adoption of existing SKUs. So when you have these competing priorities, it's really difficult to align on a strategy or even tooling because other team members may just not have it on their radar. The final challenge we had is within the data and the tracking of the risk themselves. So Workday is a pretty large company. We have multiple regions, and then we have no singular CS leader. So each of those regions really operates in their own way, almost as like a little business. So in enablement, we have to work really hard to gain consensus across all of those regions to support our global programs. So I'm sure, as you can imagine, that's really difficult. Because of that, we do have data, but it's not being entered in a consistent fashion across all of those regions. So that makes it really difficult to analyze that data, create playbooks, and make it actionable. And then from the adoption data perspective, traditionally Workday was not tracking usage data across the board. We really pride ourselves on privacy and ethics. So we don't want to take any data to target accounts that would really only benefit Workday. It's really about what benefits our customers and what is the value we're bringing to them. So because of that, our adoption data was pretty limited and spotty and across different systems. So pulling that into things like Salesforce and Gainsight was not only inconsistent, but a very manual effort for our operations teams. So some overall pretty tough challenges and blockers if you think about it, and we had to really focus on developing a comprehensive solution to address all three. So now we can move on to the solution and execution of it. But first I want to talk through what the program mission is and how we focus on that at Workday. So when we do programs at Workday, we want to ensure we define the program mission. So many times companies may take these challenges and plug a hole in one or manage them in silos, and we really didn't want to do that. We wanted to fix the overall infrastructure of this program so that we could develop a longer-term solution. So as an enablement team, we don't start with solutioning right away. Instead, we're saying, okay, what are you trying to accomplish? What are your pain points? And getting really to the why of what we're solving for. So with that in mind, I'll get to how we define this program in particular, and then I'll pass it on to Simi to describe how we solutioned it. But for this initiative, we wanted to organize account teams around a strategic plan to deploy shelfware and achieve customer outcomes to demonstrate value. So with that, our benefits are we're capturing customer goals, we're tying those to shelfware, and we're doing that in a standardized fashion across all those regions that I mentioned so that we can accurately track those over time. We also want to plan and guide customers to their desired outcomes with tasks and resources. And those could be both white glove and one-to-many approaches that Simi will get into later. And then we're going to be sharing these wins through account plans. And initially those are internally to our account teams, but we want to use those to move customers along their journey. I would honestly love to take credit for all the work required to execute on this program, but I do need to give kudos to Simi. Simi really pulled all of this together in a cohesive way, so I'll pass it on to Simi to talk through that.
Thanks, Carrie. So like Carrie said, the program mission is always at the heart of anything we start and do here at Workday. But once we define that, it's really time to start that execution phase. And most of the programs we run can be broken down into the 4 phases you see up on your screen right now: discovery, design, build, and deploy. And the first step of discovery is so important for us because we want to make sure that our customer's voice and our CSM's voice is at the forefront of everything we do. So to truly understand and tackle the problem, we had to run field interviews, and we spent hours and hours talking to every single different segment, making sure we had a good representation so we could really grasp and understand the issue. But like Carrie said, early on, we noticed that there was no global definition of this shelfware concept. Everyone kind of knew what it was. Everyone had small snippets, but I could talk to one CSM and talk to another and get a different response, let alone across the organization. So really quickly, we said, let's define and align on the definition of shelfware before we even continue discovery phase, because otherwise we're not going to discover the right thing, right? So it was really important to notice that, define something, and then be able to take it back and work through it with our field team. Something really important to get out of this discovery phase are what are the current limitations? Is everything working fine, or what are our blockers? And in this case, again, outside of the definition, we just found there was no centralized place to really look at something, and maybe our systems and tools were just not there and put in place to really help them be prescriptive about this problem. And then finally, continue to define the problem statement and the scope, right? We have a mission, but what can we actually accomplish, right? If we don't break it down into small chunks, I'm not sure where we'd be able to end up. We can't tackle the world's problems in a few months. So with that, we move into our design phase. And within the design phase, I think this is always my favorite part, because when you start it off, the sky is the limit, right? After everything we hear, we really think, okay, what can we analyze and change to our current system? Design products, different shelfware plans, what could they look like? Read up on all the latest technology advancements and systems and tools that we have. And so really, I just started designing and drawing to build big ideas. And like Carrie said, we needed to design for consistent usage metrics and still keep that privacy at heart of everything we do for our customers. So how can we make sure we know what people are using or not using in a way that is safe for our customers and for our CSM? And then again, I think we can't overstate this. Optimizing your systems and tools, and for us that was mainly our Gainsight system to really help tackle and solve this challenge. And so we really just outlined, what do we want, what is the dream end state. But then as you move to the build phase, it's really exciting because you get to work with different team members across our organization. So we were working with our technology teams, our Salesforce teams, to make these updates, and they told us, okay, these aren't possible. What kind of edits can we make? And the first thing, again, we poured our hearts into updating those systems and tools to make sure that it was prescriptive and that CSMs have the data they needed and the information they needed to be successful in tackling this problem in the field. We then centralized meaningful resources. So something we heard all the time is, I have to dig to find what I need for this conversation. So why would we do that? So let's go through and find everything that already existed across the organization, because everybody is trying to tackle this problem just a little differently. And let's centralize what we have, take stock of it, and put it in a place that's usable and accessible for everyone in the field and the entire account team. And you heard us talk about this a lot, that definition, that global definition of shelfware. We created a global dashboard to drive consistency, right? We wanted our CSMs to have a place to say, okay, this is what's deployed, this is what's not. This is what I need to know. This is risk, this is not risk. Let's take that definition that we created in the discovery phase and put it in a format where everybody could look at, everybody could see, and everybody could align on. And working cross-functionally, we can't stress enough how important that's been with our sales teams, our account teams, but then even back to our product teams, right? Why weren't our customers deploying products? Let's feed that information back. And so that dashboard was great because everybody was looking at the same thing. And along the lines of how would we feed the information back, we really needed to create a structured wellness plan, or what we call a success plan, right? Structured in what needed to happen for the customer, what were their current blockers, and we'll really get into what that looks like in just a few slides. And finally, we built a consistent approach for one-to-many. So there is this way of being able to have unique one-on-one experiences for our customers, but also there's information they need they could get in a one-to-many fashion, which could really help us with our resources. And we'll, again, kind of walk through what those webinars really look like. And then finally, we move to our deploy stage. And this is really interesting for us because we were changing a lot for our CSMs, right? Everybody, like Carrie said, was doing things a little differently. And we were trying to focus them and point them into this new way of doing things that we thought could be helpful. But how do we make sure we maximize and show the value to CSMs of for putting in that data entry this way? This is what you're going to get out of it. And could we prove that when we first started deploying it? And really show the power of any data entry and following the process flow and following the steps that we created. And by deploying that, we're able to see and show that any resource our CSMs need are easily accessible because you're we're all focused, right? We're putting our energy into one thing. So the deploy phase for us was really big this time just because it was a change in their day-to-day. But so far we've had some success with it. We can get to the next slide and we'll stop for questions. Are there any in the chat?
Awesome. Thank you so much for that first part and introduction. That's a really interesting process that you're going through. One quick question. That sounds like a very big thing to roll out across your team, especially in a team that's as global as Workday's. And you said that one part is maximizing the messages across about value across the CS teams. Do you have any kind of tips or tricks how to best track the adoption of the new system when you're working with such a global team? Do you rely on, say, champions locally, or do you have some other methods that you use to ensure that everyone's actually on board?
Yeah, I can take that.
Okay.
Or Carrie, do you want to?
Go ahead, no.
Sorry, I'll start and he'll pass it back. What's been really great with our team is that we have a centralized communication form. So we really know when and where, and CSMs know when and where they need to go to hear what they need to hear. But we highly rely on our field stakeholders and field participants. So all the people that we were interviewing and helping us through that whole process to be our champions within their own segment. So we try to have at least one, if not two, from every segment, every region. They come in, they help be our SME, they help us define the challenge, they participate in our field interviews, and they take it back and they get early previews, and in turn they get to be our champions across the globe. I don't know, Carrie, if there's anything more you want to add.
I was just going to mention that, like, most of our stakeholder groups, they tend to be our champions in our feedback loop. So they're a huge asset for us in rolling out any program. So that's usually our methodology around it.
That sounds awesome. We are starting to get quite a bit of questions coming through. We've got a question from Charlie who says that it's an awesome project. Where did you house all the reusable content, and how did you decide which content should and shouldn't be reused?
So that's something we're working on a little bit now and in our future vision. So we have what we call our content library. We use like a Spot page. Some people use Confluence or anything like that. So that's where we store most of our CSM content. And then when you get to, and we'll talk about this later, around the value related talk tracks or content that CSMs need to use, that's what we're going to be updating over time. But we need to really centralize our data first to get to a measurement point on what's working and where, and then how do we modify that over time. So I think that's more of the future vision. Right now, we're still really in the build phase on the content on what's being used.
Thank you. And one more question we've got from Matt on success metrics. Do you use standard metric goals from account to account across your various regions, or do they vary?
That could be another webinar sometime. That's another challenge we also have. So given all the regions and all the different leaders, they tend to KPI across different things. I think our heaviest KPI is around CSAT. We really hold customer satisfaction high and consistently year over year work to attain that 97% and above. And then I think as we grow as a company, we'll start looking around things like this shelfware and risk saves and things like that. But traditionally, risk hasn't been a huge problem for us. So it is more of an early stage build for us on that.
Great. And we have time for one more question. You mentioned you're protective over your customer data. Can you tell us how you get around this and how you approach it instead? How do you get data?
So we make sure we opt every customer into our adoption data. Initially, it was like signing contractual agreements, and then we did a full opt-in for customers. So now they're all opted in and they understand how we're using it. And we stick very close to those regulations and to the contract, and our privacy and ethics team make sure to approve pretty much everything we do. But our sales teams do not have access to our adoption data. They're not using that to farm out our accounts. It is solely about using it to provide more value to our customers.
That's amazing. Great. I think we have some more questions, but we'll ask them towards the end. I'll let you guys continue. Over to you.
Cool. Go ahead, Simi.
So what did we end up building? This is the kind of the solution and where we're at right now. The first step, as we mentioned, is one-to-many. We had seen success about 1.5 years ago with an onboarding one-to-many program, and we figured let's take that infrastructure we created and repurpose it, right? So that our CSMs could spend their one-on-one times and their one-on-one interaction with their customers very customer specific and focus on the individual customer's goal, where when we could send them to webinars to get that more general information, the value of the product, the value of what it could do for you. And what was really nice about that was that because we had great resources aligning and coming to our webinars, we could pivot quickly depending on the situation we're at. And we all know we're in such a unique time period. So our one-to-many programs could really say, okay, how do we do this to help you during and face this current global crisis? We created that standardized data entry for wellness plans, for success plans, right? We wanted to understand what feedback our CSMs were getting. They were hearing different things from customers, but then when we were interviewing, you're like, these all sound kind of similar or a little different, and we have answers to everything. Or if not, we could send it back to product. So let's standardize our way of entry and our way of looking at that so that we could really understand and attack the problem in aggregate. We aligned on OKRs and MBOs across our organization, and I think this was huge all the way from leadership, sales, services, products. We were all aligned on the same vision, on the same goal. If we were going to really tackle this, it had to be across the organization. It wasn't just a customer success problem, it was a Workday problem. And that was really great when it came to aligning the resources we needed to have those one-on-one conversations or hold our one-to-many webinars. And then finally, if we were going to put all of our effort into this, let's make sure it was consistent. Let's make sure we could replay this playbook internally for ourselves often. And let's come up with a consistent approach so that our CSMs didn't have fatigue of a new process being rolled out every week or for every product, right? Let's have one form, one format that our CSMs could follow consistently every time we decided to tackle a challenge like this. And we can talk about our one-to-many. So our one-to-many, what we call adoption webinars. Using that global definition, the dashboard, the data entry, we're able to easily identify shelfware campaign opportunities and really focus on what made sense to talk about in the time period we're in. Again, that's really important when it comes to what campaigns do we want to run. And then we're able to also, because of the OKRs and MBOs, get the right resources from across services. So it's not customer success holding these webinars, it's the product expert, it's our value management team, it's everybody that could really help put together an effective campaign. And then we also invited customers to webinars throughout their life cycle. It's so important that you're hitting customers at the right time and letting CSMs lead and understand with who should be invited. Making sure we're talking to our decision makers in the room, making sure that our webinars are tailored to the persona and it's hitting them at the right time. If our customers are really busy doing something else, let's not hit them with a webinar about deploying another product. Let's focus in for their time and their efforts and their resources on what they need to do to accomplish and be successful for themselves. And finally, any of our one-to-many, it's always about offering a variety. So it's not just a variety of different products, it's a variety of the flavor of the way we talk to them. Maybe when we talk to certain industries, the product has a different value, right? So making sure that we hit that and really have a variety of different options and times and ways to really get the value message across for any of our deployments and any of our one-to-many programs. We then focused on standardized data entry. Again, we talked about this a lot. I think we keep mentioning it within this webinar, but this is kind of a quick example of what they could look like, right? A shelfware adoption plan. Let's get a brief detail. Let's talk about customer blockers and really make sure to try to have drop downs that make sense, right? what was blocking our customers from deploying the products that they haven't deployed so far? What were their goals? What were their value drivers? Why could they get it? What resources have we used so far? Have they been to a different demo? Have they gotten a one-on-one demo, right? We have different options available, especially before we created this playbook. So let's see what you have used and haven't. Do you have additional plans, next steps, and do you need support from your manager? And so that's what you can see towards the bottom. We're really trying to outline this data entry and make it relevant to our customers and to our CSMs. And this is only seen internally right now. And then we're able to say, okay, especially that customer blocker section, let's feed that data back into product. Let's say this is what we've heard is blocking our customers, or let's pivot our webinars to address these problems because we've already come up with a solution there. So this has been I think, the biggest thing that we had to deploy and get our CSMs to start using, right, is this shelfware adoption plan and making sure they're filling it out when they need to, and that it's prescriptive and that they know what they need to do and they know why they're doing it. And I can't tell you the resources used so far and next steps, right? Like a lot of that was just sitting and floating in their heads. And now you can really see X% of our customers, you know, we're working with them. And I, as a CSM, can go back into my shelfware adoption plan now and say, okay, I've already tried this. And so maybe this isn't for them right now. I can close my plan and that's okay. Or, hey, I tried this and they really liked it. So let's move on to the next step in the next phase. And then finally, we'll get to our consistent approach. So this is that idea of an adoption playbook. This is kind of how we started our process flow, our diagram, and we're always iterating and changing on this. But it starts with CSM identifies shelfware targets, so no matter what the product is. And then we can figure out if they interact, they start an original engagement, if we think the customer wants general information, right? They go through this whole longer process. If you want general information, let's invite you to a webinar. Let's get you in there. If you want more information, let's go to a one-on-one meeting. And that's really right at the start. You end up with three real major options with our customers, right? They want more information, more tailored specific information. They either want general information, they're ready to discuss deployment, or just not right now. So those first three are what this playbook are designed to solve. And you'll see those in the white diamonds. And so once we get to this point, after the general information, after we hold in our webinars where they want more specific one-on-one information, that's when we're able to really tailor and target our resources. We know our customers are more interested in getting ready to talk about deployment or more interested in have more questions on value. So that's when we're able to align our resources to have one-on-one engagements with product experts, and so that they can tailor it to the customer's specific business needs. And then finally, it all ends with a one-on-one engagement in defining and understanding what are the deployment options for the customers. And again, the CSM is not the one holding the webinar, being the product expert, being the deployment expert. They're the one making sure that our customers throughout the entire stage and throughout every step are being talked to, are talking with the right individual from the Workday team, making sure we're really understanding where the customer's at in their journey and who they need to hear from and what they need to hear is really where we align on and rely on our CSMs for. And so anything in purple is where the CSM is coordinating and figuring that part out. And then the rest are really held with different project experts, deployment experts from around Workday. And that's why it was so important to align for us on OKRs across the organization. And with that, I will pass it back to Carrie.
Awesome. Thank you, Simi. So hopefully you saw that with this, we thought this was a good start in addressing some of our challenge in regards to shelfware, but it really doesn't end there. We have much larger programs in flight across the entire company to address adoption data issues, scale, and then continuing to prove value for our customers. So I just wanted to give you a quick preview into that. I broke our vision into 4 categories. So we have systems and analytics, the one-to-many scaled approach, and then the personalized white glove approach, and then our continuous improvements. So as far as systems, we are working on a massive program to centralize our data from adoption analytics to a new health score, as well as engagement data from both a one-to-one and a one-to-many approach, so that we can better utilize this data to see how our customers are obtaining value, and then again, identifying those opportunities of where they can gain even more. And then this is also where measuring the impact of those plays will come into play. So like, are the demos working? Are the webinars working? Is the one-to-one content resonating? And what's the uptake after they're introduced to those different plays? What's really cool is from a customer-facing perspective, we're going to be rolling out a self-service model where we're going to surface customer adoption data to customers on their specific tenant, so they can see what they're adopting, the value it's providing, and then be a bit more involved in their feature adoption roadmap than they traditionally have in the past. And then lastly, I want to talk about, we're going to start focusing on SKU-based sentiment. So not only are we looking at adoption, but we're also going to be looking at their level of satisfaction. I think I mentioned in the Q&A that CSAT is super important to Workday. So it's really important to recognize both. As a customer, you might be using a tool really well, but that doesn't mean you necessarily like it. And if a competitor came up, you may jump tomorrow. So it's really important to keep track of both of those things. And then in our one-to-many or scaled approach, we're going to take that SKU-based focus, and we've been really working hard on like personas and buying centers to understand who should be our targets and how do we bring them to the right content at the right time. And then lastly, not only are we going to be doing webinars, but we're really enhancing our one-to-many program to start building in automations through drip campaigns for next level feature adoption. So if I'm a customer and I adopt an emerging feature, I'll then start to get a campaign on what's next. For our CSM approach, which is the personalized white glove approach, once all of our data is clean and updated in a centralized location, we'll be able to surface to our CSMs in a much better way of where our customers are on their journey today. And based on that, what content is most relevant to them that they should start bringing to their one-on-one engagements or using in their annual business reviews. We're also going to take a hard look at those annual business reviews and make sure that they're more value and outcomes based than they have in the past. And then the last part, which I think is super important, is it's not easy to uptake some of our features. As I mentioned, they're deployed in phases. So it's one thing to educate customers on what they need to uptake. It's another thing in supporting them to do so. So how do we build out those services to aid customers in taking on those new features or deploying those SKUs? And then lastly, over time, we're just going to continue to iterate on these plays. Workday really holds that agile mindset very high, and that's how we run all of our programs so that we can pivot pretty quickly if needed. And that's really it if we want to open it up for questions.
Thank you so much. That was really interesting. I am going to admit I've seen the slides a few times, but I was still entirely engulfed in what you guys were talking about. It was a fantastic way to run such a program. So thank you so much. We do have a bunch of questions, so I'm going to jump straight into it. Firstly, can you just remind everyone what SKU stands for?
Simi, do you know the exact definition? It's basically like a product line.
Okay.
So like if you have HCM and planning or financials or time tracking, they're all different SKUs.
We have a suggestion for stock keeping unit in the chat.
Okay. That probably makes more sense.
Anyway, it stands for one of Workday's business units in such case. We have a couple of questions actually around the measurement of success for such programs. Do you have a way to measure the success right now? And at this point, do you know how much this approach has closed the adoption gap that you were talking about at the start?
So we do for our one-to-many approach, and I'll probably pass, Simi's my BA, SME, so I'll probably pass that on to Simi to talk about how she's measuring that today. But I would say from a one-to-one approach, we're not there yet. But Simi, do you want to talk about how from a one-to-many approach we're looking at those analytics?
Yeah, from a one-to-many approach, we definitely want to make sure that we have a high enough rate of registered to attend. Like, that's huge for us. Make sure that we're reaching out to a certain number of customers quarterly. Those are really our success metrics that we start talking through. And then really we get even further. We pull live during webinars, really making sure that we have the right engagement in any and all webinars through data. It's been really important for us in terms of success for our one-to-many. Outside of that, we're still definitely developing and iterating on our final major success metrics. But we have definitely heard, I think right now, it's hard to quantify the value that our CSMs are hearing from following this approach. And so that's something we're starting to work on, is how do we internally create success metrics.
And then I can touch on from like our product team's perspective, like if they're building a configuration guide or anything support tool like that, we do post that on our community, and we do have access stats. They're probably not the cleanest data, but we're looking into how do we marry the access stats to the uptake in either features or deployment to see if those resources are being used.
Great. Thank you for that. We have a number of questions around CSAT. I think you've caught people's attention with the focus on that. Can you tell us a little bit more about that methodology? For example, how often you carry out CSAT post deployment, and also do you base those on feedback from the buyer or from the end users?
Yes, so we don't currently do end user NPS today. That's something we're looking into. We do CSAT through our NPS, which is normally for our named support contacts, and that's one time a year. And then we also do our executive sponsor survey, which is also one time a year after the NPS one. I can say we're starting to look into rolling CSAT surveys, but we're not there yet. And then we do a really good job of, based on our interactions with customers, where would we forecast them on that CSAT today? And then we post-survey look at forecasted versus actual, and where do we need to go drive one-on-one engagements to correct any issues that we may have.
Great. It sounds like a constantly evolving approach, like everything else that you guys have spoken about.
Yes, that's another program.
Another set of questions that we've got is around centralizing data. So you mentioned that you're now centralizing data, software data, CX, customer goals. Can you tell us exactly where and how you aggregate all of this data? Is that in a particular tool? And then how does it get used from there?
Right. I'm not sure if I can mention the tool today, but we are pulling all that into one data lake. And that has been a massive undertaking as well. So we have a program called Adoption Analytics that's been building out, taking all the adoption SKUs, tying them to value, and then outlining the features all the way from emerging to advanced. So that's one of our initiatives to get that to the data lake, as well as contacts and personas. And then our teams, not our team specifically, but a different team within Workday, has been meeting with all the different business units to prioritize what data needs to be pulled into that data lake. And then how would we cross-analyze to make sure each team is effective and aligned?
Mm-hmm. There's a follow-up question on that. Is that level of data hygiene a part of the company's OKRs?
Yes, very much so.
Great. And a question around the kind of white glove approach. How do you get the customers' goals from your customers? Is it through direct conversation, or do you manage to capture them through your product?
Right now it is through direct conversation, and that's something we're looking at the tools to scale. We currently use Altify for account planning, Salesforce for our CRM, and then Gainsight for our customer success tool. But that is something we're really analyzing as far as tools on what would be best to align across account teams to get that, and then how do we make that more interactive with customers. But currently today it is from one-to-one communications, and that is the area that we're trying to streamline data entry so we can better measure and track those.
Thank you. They keep coming. We have a couple of questions, actually a number of them, around the playbook that you showed, the template. I think people really like this one. Is this a manual entry? Do you ask customer success managers to fill this in by hand? And if yes, what format are you using?
So it is manual. I will say because of the system challenges, we started it in PowerPoint, which is not ideal and is the bane of my existence, but we're looking at using Altify, since that is what all of our cross-functional teams use for account planning. And so far it is a great tool for sales. We aren't so sure about existing product lines that are already within the customer base. So we're analyzing tools on whether we should be using Gainsight Success Plans or Altify, but currently we're using Altify as the interim solution. But it is manual data entry right now. Eventually, once we nail down a product that we want to use to support that, then we would work on scaling that out and automating where we can.
Mm-hmm. And can you clarify if those templates are something that all teams have access to, or is it just customer success that can see them?
All teams have access to them. So our customer success managers aren't necessarily responsible for the renewal. It's more of the customer base account executives, but they very much play a part in that. So both CBAEs and CSMs need to see these shelfware plans.
Okay. Final question around this. How do you get other teams around the things that they need to do on these project plan, on these account plans? Do you assign tasks to them, or do you use another methodology?
So we do assign tasks, and that is something that I think Gainsight is very great at, which is why we're looking at that tool for that. But right now, again, that's pretty manual and requires a lot of account teaming. Yeah. So we're trying to get better at that as well.
Amazing. And one last question that usually sometimes appears a little controversial, but they have asked, do you collect NPS? And if so, how often do you collect it?
Not for end user as of yet, but we do for named support contact managers, and it's in the form of a survey. So it's not in product. They just fill out a survey across their sentiment across our product lines.
Perfect. That's amazing. I think we managed to get through the majority of questions asked. Obviously, you guys inspired a lot of interest with your presentation. I can't do anything apart from thank you so much for your time. It's been fantastic to have you on our webcast. And I do have a feeling, do not be surprised if we call you again. This time probably at a time that is not 6:30, wherever you guys are. Perhaps we'll pick a better time that everyone can attend. Thank you so much to everybody who asked questions, who was with us. Our next webcast is actually going to be in 2 months' time. There's a lot of digital events that we're giving you guys right now, so we decided just to split those out a little bit. Fantastic session. Thank you to our speakers and to our attendees. Have a fantastic afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.